See, the issue is with the fuel injection system right here. We need specialized parts from Italy.
Do you expect me to believe it's that complicated? It's just an oil change.
You know, there's a specific kind of silence that happens when a $300,000 machine decides to turn into a $300,000 paperweight. It's not a peaceful silence. It's a heavy, expensive silence that screams, louder than any engine ever could. And I heard that silence on a Tuesday afternoon in July, right in the middle of a scorching heat wave in Scottsdale, Arizona. The kind of heat where you can practically see the air shimmering off the asphalt. My name is Mateo Cruz, and back then, I ran a shop called Cruise Control in South Phoenix, which sounds fancy, but was really just a cinder block garage with a swamp, cooler that rattled like a dying lung, and a floor that had absorbed so much oil over the years. It was basically a fire hazard, but it was mine, paid for with sweat and saved pennies. A long way from the dusty farm in Oaxaca where my abuelo first taught me that engines have heartbeats. I was at a gas station on the edge of town, filling up my beat-up Silverado after a service call, wiping grease off my hands with a rag that was dirtier than I was when this gleaming, hyper-blue McLaren P1 pulled in next to me. It was a spaceship, not a car, a hybrid hypercar that looked like it was doing 100 miles an hour while standing still. And the guy driving it was exactly who you'd expect, a tech CEO named Julian Thorne, wearing sunglasses that cost more than my rent and talking loudly on a headset about disrupting the market. But even over his shouting, I heard it this faint, rhythmic tink-tink hiss coming from the McLaren's engine bay, a sound so subtle most people would miss it, like a drummer missing a beat in a stadium concert. But to me, it was screaming. Because my abuelo didn't teach me to read manuals, he taught me to listen, to close my eyes and feel the vibration of the metal, to understand the language of combustion. Julian hung up his phone and looked stressed, slamming the gas cap shut. So I, being the guy who can't help himself when a machine is hurting, walked over and said, "Hey man, nice ride, but you got a harmonic resonance issue in your intake manifold. Cylinder 4 is starving for air because the variable runner is fluttering." Julian looked at me, looked at my grease-stained shirt, my work boots, the old truck behind me, and he actually laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh that felt like a slap in the face, and said, "Excuse me, you think you can diagnose a McLaren P1 while pumping gas? Stick to changing oil on Civics, amigo. This is Formula One technology, not a taco truck." He got in, revved the engine, which made me wince because I could hear the metal crying, and peeled out, leaving me standing there in the heat, feeling that familiar burn of shame that I'd felt 1,000 times since I crossed the border. At 19, with nothing but a backpack and a head full of dreams, I went back to my shop, back to fixing water pumps on Toyotas and alternators on Fords, trying to forget about the blue spaceship. But 2 weeks later, the universe, which has a funny sense of humor, decided to circle back. See, Julian Thorne wasn't just a jerk. He was a desperate jerk, because that McLaren was his ticket to a merger meeting with a group of Italian investors who were obsessed with automotive heritage. And the car had died on him 3 times in a week. And the dealership, let's call them Apex Luxury, had replaced the ECU, the fuel injectors, the spark plugs, and charged him 50 grand. But the tink-tink hiss was still there, getting louder, haunting him. I was under a '98 Buick when I saw a flatbed tow truck pull up to my shop, and my jaw hit the floor when I saw that blue McLaren strapped to the back, looking like a captured alien beast in my gritty industrial park. Julian got out of a town car behind it, looking humble, or as humble as a guy in a tailored suit can look in a mechanic's shop that smells like gear oil and sage, and he walked up to me, taking off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were red-rimmed and tired. "The dealership wants to ship it to England," he said, skipping the hello. "They say it needs a full engine rebuild, 3 months, 100 grand. But I have this meeting in 48 hours, and my assistant, she remembered you. Said you diagnosed it at the gas station without even opening the hood." "I remember what you said at the gas station too," I said, wiping my hands, not making it easy for him. "I was an ass," Julian admitted, "and I gotta give him credit. He said it straight. I'm desperate. Look, name your price, if you can get This running by Thursday morning. I'll double whatever your rate is. I looked at the car. Then I looked at my wall of tools, hand-me-downs, pawn shop finds. Tools I'd modified myself with a grinder and a welding torch because I couldn't afford the snap-on truck prices, and I felt that pull, that challenge. Leave it, I said. But you don't come back until I call you, and you don't ask how I did it. For the next 36 hours, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just lived inside that engine. I didn't hook up a computer because the computer was what lied to the dealership mechanics, telling them everything was green when the engine was dying red. I used a stethoscope, an old doctor's one I found at a flea market, and I pressed it against the carbon fiber intake plenum, closing my eyes, blocking out the traffic noise, blocking out the doubts, just listening to the symphony of valves and pistons, searching for the discordant note, and I found it. It wasn't a broken part. It was a design flaw, a microscopic vibration at high temperatures that caused a vacuum leak in the variable intake runner. Exactly what I thought. But the fix wasn't a new part, because the new part would have the same flaw. I had to innovate. I had to be an engineer, without a degree, so I took a piece of high-grade titanium scrap I had from a motorcycle project, and I spent 6 hours machining a custom bracket, a tiny little shim that would change the resonance frequency of the manifold, just enough to cancel out the vibration. It was math. It was music. It was pure intuition. I installed it, torqued the bolts by hand because I don't trust air tools on aluminum. And at 3 a.m. on Thursday, I turned the key, the engine fired up, and it settled into an idle that was smooth as silk, a low, aggressive purr with zero hesitation. The tink-tink hiss was gone, replaced by the pure, unadulterated sound of engineering. Perfection. I called Julian at 6 a.m., and when he showed up, he looked like he was walking to the gallows, expecting bad news. Expecting me to say it was hopeless. Start it, I said, tossing him the carbon fiber key fob. He got in, pressed the red button, and a look on his face, man, I wish I could bottle that look and sell it. It was pure shock mixed with relief, mixed with a sudden realization that he knew absolutely nothing about how the world really worked. It's perfect, he whispered, revving it, listening to the revs drop quickly and cleanly. What did you replace? The dealership said the whole block was warped. I didn't replace anything, I said, leaning against the door frame, feeling the exhaustion hit me. I tuned it. I added a counterweight bracket I made to stop the harmonic vibration. The computer can't hear the metal stretching, Julian, but I can. He took it for a test drive, tearing up South Mountain Road, and when he came back, the brakes were ticking from the heat, and he was grinning like a kid who just rode his first roller coaster. I have the meeting at the Phoenician Resort in an hour, he said, checking his watch. Come with me. No way, I laughed. I got a transmission on a Ford F-150 that needs to be dropped. I insist, he said, and this time it wasn't a command, it was a request. Please. The McLaren executives are there, the guys from Woking, England. They flew in for this partnership. If they ask about the car, I want you to explain it because honestly, I still don't understand what the hell you did. So, I washed my face, put on my cleanest work shirt, which still had a small oil stain on the pocket, and hopped into the passenger seat of a car that cost more than my entire neighborhood. And we drove to the fanciest resort in Arizona, pulling up to the valet stand right behind a line of limos. We walked into this conference room that smelled like expensive cologne and fear. And there were these 3 British guys in sharp suits, and 1 Italian guy, Dr. Rossi, the head of special operations. For the investors, a legend in the industry. A guy whose name was on patents I studied at the library. Also there was Braden, the service manager from the dealership, looking smug, probably there to explain why Julian's car wasn't working. And when he saw me walk in with Julian, his face turned the color of a sour grape. Mr. Thorne, Dr. Rossi said, standing up, his accent thick and elegant. We heard you were having technical difficulties with the P1. We expected you in a rental. Actually, Julian said, stepping aside to reveal me, my car is outside, running better than the day it left the factory, thanks to Mr. Cruz here. Braden scoffed. Actually laughed out loud. Mr. Cruz, you mean the guy who runs that chop shop down on 7th, Julian. Please tell me you didn't let an unlicensed mechanic touch the warranty seals on a hypercar. Dr. Rossi held up a hand, silencing Braden. Running better. That is a bold claim. The P1 is the pinnacle of engineering. It cannot run better than perfection. Let's go outside, Julian said. Smiling that shark smile of his. We went out to the valet circle. The heat was already rising, and Julian started the car, giving it a few revs, holding it at 4,000 RPM where the vibration used to be, and holding it there steady, screaming, perfect. Dr. Rossi walked around the car, his head cocked to the side like a bird, listening. Then he signaled for Julian to cut the engine. He walked straight up to me, ignoring Julian, ignoring Braden, and he looked me right in the eye. You modified the intake resonance, he said, not asking, but stating. We have been chasing a phantom vibration in the dyno room for 6 months. On the next generation prototype, we thought it was the fuel mapping, but it's the manifold itself, isn't it? It's the third runner, I said, speaking his language now. At high heat, it expands about 2 microns more than the others because it's closer to the turbo shielding. Creates a standing wave that disrupts the airflow. I made a titanium brace to act as a heat sink and a dampener. Dr. Rossi stared at me for a long time, then he turned to Braden, whose mouth was hanging open. This chop shop mechanic just solved a physics problem that 12 PhDs in my department have been arguing about for half a year. The silence in that valet circle was heavier than the heat, broken only by Braden trying to stammer out an excuse, something about authorized procedures and liability. But Dr. Rossi cut him off with a wave of his hand that was so dismissive it practically erased the guy from existence. Open the deck, Rossi commanded, and I popped the rear engine cover, revealing the gold-lined engine bay, pointing to the small, unassuming titanium bracket I had milled in the middle of the night. Rossi leaned in, inspecting the welds, running his finger over the curve of the metal, and then he pulled out a jeweler's loop from his pocket. Who carries a jeweler's loop? And looked at the grain of the titanium. Hand-milled, he asked, looking up at me with eyebrows raised. Bridgeport manual mill, I said. Didn't have time to program a CNC. You calculated the mass dampening in your head. I listened to it, I said, tapping my ear. The engine tells you what it needs if you shut up long enough to hear it. Rossi stood up, brushed the dust off his suit, and turned to the other executives who were watching this scene like it was a tennis match. Gentlemen, the merger is fine, but I have a new priority. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card, handing it to me. Mr. Cruz, McLaren Special Operations is opening a new heritage center in Los Angeles. We need a master technician who understands that cars are analog souls. In a digital world, I am offering you the position, head of the department. Name your salary. Braden looked like he was going to have a stroke. Julian looked proud, like he had discovered me, which was rich considering he called me a taco truck mechanic 2 weeks ago. I took the card, feeling the weight of it. High-quality card stock, embossed lettering, a ticket to a life where I wouldn't have to worry about rent, where I'd work in an air-conditioned lab with white floors and tools that cost more than my house. I looked at Julian, who gave me a nod, encouraging me. I looked at Braden, who looked terrified that I was about to become his boss's boss. And then I thought about my shop. I thought about Mrs. Higgins, whose 2000 for Camry I kept running because she needed it to get to dialysis, and she couldn't afford a new car. I thought about the kid, Leo, who sweeps my floors after school because he wants to learn how to weld, and he has nowhere else to go but the streets. I thought about my abuelo, who fixed tractors in the dirt so his village could eat. I'm honored. Dr. Rossi, I said, and I meant it, my voice catching a little in my throat. Truly. But I can't move to LA. We can pay for relocation, Rossi said. Whatever you need. It's not about the money, I said, handing the card back. Though my hand trembled a bit, my community is here. There are people in South Phoenix who need their cars to get to work, to pick up their kids, to survive. If I leave, There's nobody who will fix a radiator for a plate of tamales and a promise to pay next week. I fix machines, sir, but I serve people. Rossi looked at me, and for a second I thought he was going to be insulted, but then a slow smile spread across his face, a genuine smile of respect. Then we will bring the work to you, Rossi said. I will designate Cruise Control as the only authorized independent service center for McLaren Heritage vehicles in the Southwest, provided you allow us to send our junior engineers to you for a 2-week internship to learn how to listen. I stood there, stunned, the sun beating down on me, realizing that I didn't have to leave my world to change it. Julian stepped up then, looking at his shoes for a second before looking at me. And I'd like to make a donation, he said, to your shop. Buy that CNC machine you talked about, and maybe set up a scholarship for kids like that Leo you mentioned. The deal was signed right there on the hood of the P1. In the months that followed, my life got weird, but weird. I had billionaires flying their Enzos and their Paganis to my cinder block shop in South Phoenix, parking them next to beat-up Civics and rusty pickups. I had engineers from England sweating in the Arizona heat, learning how to diagnose a misfire with a screwdriver and a piece of hose. Braden even came by once, humbled, asking if I could look at a persistent issue on a transmission he couldn't figure out. I didn't rub it in. I handed him a wrench and showed him. But the moment that stuck with me, the one that matters more than the money or the fame, happened about 6 months later. I was closing up shop, the neon sign buzzing, and I saw Julian pull up, not in the McLaren, but in a regular SUV. He walked in, grabbed a beer from the fridge without asking we were friends now, and leaned against the lift. You know, he said, looking around at the cluttered, messy, beautiful shop. I thought I was buying a fix for my car that day, but I think I bought a lesson on how to see people. Don't get sentimental on me, Julian. I laughed, wiping down a torque wrench. I'm serious. He said, I looked at you and saw a grease monkey. You looked at a broken engine and saw a symphony. It makes me wonder what else I've been missing because I was too busy looking at the price tag instead of the value. And that's the question I want to leave you with today. We live in a world that is obsessed with the shiny wrapper, with the credentials, with the official stamp of approval. We trust the guy in the suit because he's in a suit, and we ignore the guy in the work boots because he's got dirt under his fingernails. But how many geniuses are we walking past every day? How many solutions to our biggest problems are locked inside the heads of people who don't have the right degree or the right accent? My abuelo used to say, the gold is always at the bottom of the river, buried in the mud. You have to get your hands dirty to find it. So, next time you dismiss someone because they don't look the part, or because their solution sounds too simple, ask yourself, are you listening to the engine, or are you just looking at the paint job? Because true brilliance doesn't always wear a tie. Sometimes it wears a name tag that says Mateo. Let me know in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they were better than you, or have you been the one to judge too quickly? I read every story because, unlike Julian used to be, I know the real value is in the details. Thanks for listening.